Welcome back for another week of Political Breakfast. So glad that you're here. We are in the thick of political season, and with me here today are our strategists, Democratic strategist Tharon Johnson and Republican strategist Brian Robinson. Thank you so much for being here today. We're starting off another week, and it's sure to be another busy one, isn't it?
Well, we got Kamala Harris coming back to the state. She didn't get to come after she became the nominee because we had a storm coming through Savannah that week. So she's coming to Savannah this week. We just had J.D. Vance here in Valdosta. So the question kind of becomes now, this is this neat part about being in Georgia, being one of the decider states, is we're going to get a lot of FaceTime with these guys.
Yeah. And Tharon, we want to welcome you back because we haven't seen you since the switch, and your job really picked up in terms of consulting for the Democratic Party once Biden threw in the towel, so to speak, and made way for Kamala Harris to become the presidential nominee. And you were in the thick of it in Chicago. So I don't know, bring us up to date. What was that like for you to be in the thick of all of that?
Yeah, no, thank you, Lisa. And I want to start off by just thanking all the listeners who reached out to me personally. A lot of you all text and called. I saw a lot of folks at the convention. I saw a lot of folks at different events. And so, really appreciate the support that people from all parties, Black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight, Asian, that listen to this podcast. Just want to make sure that the listeners really feel that I missed them, and definitely the love that people showed me, the text message, elected officials reaching out. So thank you all for that. All right, be that as it may, yes, I did choose a very interesting time to sort of take a break from this podcast, and what has happened has just been historic. We spent a lot of time the last couple of years on this podcast talking about Vice President Kamala Harris. There have been a lot of negative things that have been said about her from all of us, a lot of critiques. But the fact of the matter is that you look at what she's been able to do since she stepped up after President Biden said, "Hey, it's time for me to pass the torch." Has been unprecedented. Almost $600 million raised. The enthusiasm is unmatched from any other presidential candidate in their campaign. And so one of the things that I felt at the convention, Lisa, to get directly to your comments, is that, we are a Democratic Party and a coalition that's united. We always got to make sure that we give President Joe Biden his credit for really making sure that he did the right thing, not only for himself and his family, but he did the right thing for his country and his party. And so this is a new race. There's no more of this calling the man old, no more of this calling whether he has dementia, whether he can walk upstairs or not. That's over. Now it's a vibrant Black woman, and she's been Black all her life, who is now proving to the American people that she's ready to step up. And so she accomplished a few things at the convention. Number one, I think her speech was impeccable. She told people who she is and what she wants to do for this country. She not only reached out to the Democratic base, she reached out to moderates and Republicans. And if you look at just the two conventions, it was just like apples and oranges. Georgia had Lil Jon. What other state are going to have a hip hop artist like Lil Jon come out and introduce your state in the roll call? But beyond Lil Jon, look at how Georgia was represented. Raphael Warnock gave a great speech. Lucy McBath. And others, and I may have forgotten some people, but I definitely know that those two were the highlights.
Jason Carter.
Jason Carter did a good job as well. And look, you got to give a big credit to the Democratic National Convention Committee. These are people who came together and planned a convention that was safe. Yes, it was a little chaotic, but that's a good, right? Because we had big crowds, Lisa.
They all are.
Crowds.
Yeah, 50,000
people
plus,
that can
right.
get in. And I want to say this. I think that there was a really strong consideration of moving this convention speech to Soldier Field, but because of the attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump's and security concerns, I think that there was a right decision to keep it in the United Center. So, and lastly, Tim Walz. This is a guy who a lot of us, I haven't had a chance to talk about this on this podcast. If you had to ask me where was he in my sort of list of people who I was going to pick, he definitely was in the top three. But he plays a instrumental role in diversifying this ticket. His speech was great. His family is awesome, no matter what the Republicans try to say about his son. And so now,
whoa.
No.
That's not.
No, it's true. You said it. I'm back, B-Rob. So just get ready. This is smoke,
right.
not
because
no more.
Right. No. And you're responsible for every offensive thing said by any Democrat out there. Anything said about his son is inappropriate and wrong, and they not represent the Republican Party.
I didn't say Brian Robinson said it. I said that the Republicans have said it, and they have. So be that as it may, Lisa. I'm back. This is the smoke I'm bringing. And lastly, but now the campaign really begins. And so the fact that Vice President Harris is making her first stop after taking a much needed rest from the convention shows you how important the state is to this election.
Yeah, and back to the negativity surrounding Vice President Harris at one time. I think it was mainly a lot of people wanted to know, where is she? What is she doing? She wasn't in the spotlight enough for some, but certainly respected, her qualities and her talent and her knowledge. With that said, Brian, the honeymoon doesn't seem to be waning for presidential nominee Harris, like some have predicted would happen. What is the Republican response to that? What are they hoping for at this point? An October surprise?
Here's where we are right now. The Democrats are just so excited. They're elated. You could see the energy in the arena last week. And they are just so relieved that they're not headed toward an iceberg, which they were when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket. And they already mentioned the old age, the senility, the going up the stairs. The Democrats felt that very strongly, and all of a sudden they're back in the game. They've got a chance, and they're willing to be forgiving of a lot of things. They are willing to let Kamala Harris do what she needs to do right now to position herself to win. And the speech that she gave on Thursday night was really well done. It was tailored toward people who live in Metro Phoenix, Metro Philly, Metro Atlanta, people who maybe used to vote Republican, independents, moderates. Now, that's not reflective of where she's been in her career. That's certainly not reflective of the positions that she took in 2019 when she was running for the first time. We weren't hearing her talk about police brutality. We weren't hearing her talking about how we should bail out rioters. We weren't hearing her say that illegal immigration should be decriminalized or that we should do away with private health insurance. And these are the things that she stood for just 5 short years ago. And what we saw on Thursday night was a strong play toward the middle. At some juncture, the honeymoon will end in the sense that there's going to be ups and downs in any campaign. She's going to have to face media and act on her feet. She's shown that she can perform well when on a teleprompter with a prepared speech. She's done a good job on that. We all are looking forward to that next step when she's got to be, responsive with something that's not written down in front of her. And I think at some juncture, the left of the party is going to be like, hey, give us something, right? You're doing all this plays in the middle. You got to tell us that you're one of us in some way. And that's a struggle that Donald Trump is having, too, as he has played toward the middle. You saw a story in either the Washington Post or New York Times last week about how the far right is like, hello, no, you got to like remind us of why we're with you. I think the left is going to do that with Kamala Harris in the coming weeks, too. They are going to let her do what she needs to do in this first month. We're now getting into that second month. We're now getting to the post-Labor Day period. She's going to have to make her base happy.
So the base is happy, Lisa.
For now they are.
No.
Yeah.
B-Rob has been coming on this podcast now for months, wanting to tell us what Democrats are thinking. So I'm a person who lives it, eats it, breathes it. Whatever, every single day. The base is happy. The base knows who Kamala Harris is. And you're talking about throwing them things that they can be happy about. Well, let's go into the meat of that, Lisa. Number one, she introduced an economic plan that definitely the base supports, right? It's a very thought out plan that not only helps working class Americans of all races, it helps middle class Americans. You talk about how she was able to be very stern on where she is on this war in Gaza. Okay, this is a very important issue that the Republicans have been trying to divide the Democratic base by them being so strongly on one side, but saying that the Democrats can't find a viable solution. And so she definitely talked about the innocent lives that are being lost, people being killed in this war in Gaza, but she reinstated her unwavering support for Israel and for the Jewish community. And so to me, this speech, this convention, honestly, Lisa, painted a different picture. It was a clear contrast between a convention that really focusing on, yes, we know there were the Obamas. We cannot talk about the Obamas. I mean, what better couple to come out and remind us as American of who we can be. But also there was some direct, attacks at Donald Trump, which was deserving. You heard her talk about a vision for the future. And so this whole notion that the base is somehow sitting on the side and not happy with her or just waiting for the moment to strike. I mean, when you have AOC and others speaking at the convention, joining this ticket, we are united. Now, will there be an opportunity for her to talk about an issue that the base may not necessarily be happy about? Absolutely. She will do that. She's got to win this election. This is a base plus strategy that the Harris-Walz campaign has put in place. And so she understands that not everything that she talks about is going to have to only appeal to Democrats. She's got to get 207 electoral votes. And then the last thing I would say is this, Lisa, is that, let's really just step back and really honestly think about where we are now in this country. When I last appeared on this podcast, it was all about which white man was the oldest, which one, was the less senile, which one actually was going to not say the bad thing about each other. Biden had started saying really bad things about Trump. Now the Republican Party is having an extreme difficulty of attacking this woman. And so this whole notion that she's not prepared, she can't stand on her feet and do interviews, it's just not true.
The timing. The timing.
So when she's ready, just like when I was ready, okay, we have a right to do this in America. And when she's ready, she will have those interviews. I don't worry about her ability to answer the questions and to have defiant policy stances. What I am concerned about is how does she do it in a way that she doesn't get judged inappropriately because she is a woman. I mean, and Lisa, you know this as a black woman in this country for a long time. You all don't have the same luxuries. You don't have the same privileges. You don't have the same, you don't start on second base like some of the white males, like Donald Trump, who started on second base. This woman started at home plate and has worked her way up. And so that's what I worry about more than anything. Is America ready to put away some of the sexism that exists in this country and allow this woman to earn the opportunity to be the president of the United States? That's the challenge ahead, not her ability to be able to talk about the issues and to be able to articulate and hold her own. This is a woman who's been doing it longer than Donald Trump has been doing it, and J.D. Vance. And so she's been more elective office than those two combined. So I think she'll be all right.
Brian, if we can we go back to the convention? Last week, a few of our listeners may have not heard you correctly. They thought you were saying that the body there was not about God and country, and a lot of those people in there were not churchgoers, et cetera. And you had Senator Raphael Warnock right at the center there.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain what you were saying, because we did receive some feedback regarding
No,
that.
I'm sure. And I said, I was speaking generally, but I've seen this. There's a secularization of America that is across the country, and that is even more pronounced within the Democratic Party ranks. I was not saying that there are no people of faith in the Democratic coalition at all, but the secularization, the non-church going population, is the biggest it's ever been in the history of our country. This is a fact. And the base of the Democratic Party is probably more of a secular base than a religious focused base. It's really not even a matter of opinion. This is sort of bared out by the scientific studies of the American population that we are seeing today. So that's where I was coming from. That's what I meant. It certainly wasn't implying that all Republicans are good, fine Christians who go to church every week and Democrats are a bunch of heathens. Not by any means. I know a lot of Christian Democrats, and that's fantastic. But that has not been something that you've seen, the kind of appeals that we saw in the Democratic convention. That has not been regular for Democrats for a long time, this sort of God and country. And it's not just me. I mean, the national media was saying the Democrats have ceded a lot of that ground to the Republicans, that God and country type thematic. So this was a trying to recapture some of that. I think it's smart politics. I thought the USA signs, the people waving the American flag, chanting USA, I think the references to religion and to Raphael Warnock citing scripture, I think the important part of it was showing respect to people of faith. That your views, people like you are welcome here. I think that was smart. But is it largely a secular party? Yeah, I don't. And I don't mean to offend anybody by that. I'm just talking about the statistics that I've seen.
Yeah, Lisa, listen, this is just the climate we're in, and we're just going to have to, unfortunately, deal with it from the next, less than now 70 days. I know B. Rob's heart. I know what he meant. And so he doesn't need me to defend him. He's a grown man, but I would step up and say that, what he meant and what he said and how it was interpreted. That's what the listeners, sort of felt compelled to write in. And I applaud those listeners for writing in or calling the show, because it gives Brian an opportunity to clarify. But I do push back on this notion that we haven't had God and country and faith at past conventions. I mean, go back to Jesse Jackson. I talked about this, Lisa, with you when you did the morning edition. I mean, in 1984, many people who are now very prevalent in the Democratic Party politics got their start because of Jesse Jackson. Well, his whole legacy, and B-Rob, you know this, was around civil rights. And the civil rights movement was inclusive of religion. It was, a matter of fact, predicated on the infrastructure. The very foundation of this nonviolent movement was led by individuals, women and men, who represented different types of religion. And so then, he decided to run as a Democrat. So this whole notion that faith and God and country hasn't been displayed at the convention is just not true. Now, we want to get into a battle, how many American flags are in the background, or how big the American flag is. That's a whole nother conversation. So, I think that when we say that we have allowed Republicans to sort of appear or give the allure that they're more strong on God and country than Democrats, it's just not true. The truth of the matter is that we're all Americans, and we're a country made up of immigrants of different faiths and different religion. And so what you saw at the Democratic convention that you did not see at the Republican convention is an inclusive invitation for all these religions to be invited and to have a speaking role. And that has been the case ever since I've been looking at conventions in the late 80s, early 90s. But I don't want to just say that it's just politics, because it's not just politics. What Raphael Warnock, our U.S. Senator, did by saying, hey, Donald Trump will hold up the Bible, but he should try reading it, to me, that crystallizes exactly that the man who's leading the Republican Party likes to talk about God and country, but is he doing it through his acts and deeds? Is he living a biblical life, right? Is he living a life that is Christ-like, or whatever his religion is, right? So I think that's where Democrats are saying we're not going to concede this notion that if you're a Democrat, then therefore you may not believe in God, or you may not necessarily have a religious faith. And that's not true. And that's what the convention, I think, attempted to do, to show that inclusiveness. And they did a really good job of it.
You buy that, Brian?
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I didn't say anything wrong. I'm not apologizing for anything that I said. I don't mean to offend anybody. What I'm talking about is borne out by statistics that we have seen a massive change in American culture, and the way we have sorted out ourselves is the Democratic Party has become more secular. The Republican Party is the home of the religious right, for example. But again, that's not to say you can't be a Christian and be a Democrat. I'm not being overly broad. I'm just talking about statistics, and I would rather move on.
Move on. As Harris-Walz are doing on a bus tour through Georgia this week. Donald Trump stumping, and I believe in Michigan today. What will Georgia look like? Just want to get, the vantage point from both of you these coming weeks, because we are down to the wire. Come September, it's going to go just like that. Tharon?
Lisa, the one thing that I'm very happy about is that immediately after both Vice President Harris and Governor Walz definitely have taken some time to rest after a grueling schedule. We got to talk about this. There was a point in time, and again, I wasn't on the podcast, so just want to remind our listeners, I think Saba, who did a good job in my absence, Trump pretty much took a vacation. I mean, he was missing in action for about a month. And so leading up to the convention, even after his convention and before the attempted assassination, Trump was not really keeping a schedule. I mean, his schedule was kind of, just very, very smooth and fluid, but not aggressive. It's not robust. And so the fact that now that they've had the convention, they're coming back to Georgia. And not only they're coming back to Georgia, Lisa, they're going to rural parts of Georgia, shows me that the data, and Rob talked about statistics earlier. Well, let me tell you about these statistics. We believe that there are counties in this state, in Georgia, that are going to be more compelled and more enthusiastic about voting for this ticket than they were about the previous ticket. So that's why you see them landing in Atlanta or in the Atlanta area. I don't, as we tape, we don't have all the details yet. So for our listeners, but we do know one thing: they're going to get on a bus that's going to have a great deal of security, and they're going to have stops along the way in these many offices. We got almost 200 staffers on the ground now. a lot of offices open, and we do know that she's going to end in Savannah. We know that there's 35,000 volunteers that the Democrats have been able to put up in place. And what's going to be very important, and just let our listeners know, is where does she go and who's at the rallies, right? In which cities and which towns that she'll pick. And that Savannah Augusta media market, Brian knows this very well. She's going to dominate that media market, but I think that she'll do a tour that really capitalizes opportunities within the Macon, Columbus area, Albany. And so people who don't really get a lot of the Atlanta network television sort of back and forth about this campaign will have a front center opportunity to really hear from her. And then lastly, look, I think that Mayor Johnson, shout out to my guy, Mayor Van Johnson down in Savannah, who's been really pushing for the vice president to come back to Savannah. This was a trip that was scheduled before the heavy rain and the hurricane that we had with Debbie. And so, Lisa, you know me for a long time. I've been doing this podcast. The money is great. Check. They're spending money here. Now they're expanding her ability to talk to voters. And so that means that they feel very comfortable with the black vote. This whole black male vote thing with Trump, that's done. We're not going to hear that anymore for the campaign. And so now she believes that there are some key counties along the way in this bus tour that her showing up there and spending valuable time with these constituents are going to help drive up the numbers in Georgia.
Right. What's your take? Donald Trump, I don't know. That they're saying that he really isn't navigating this change with Harris extremely well at this point. I don't know. Is that a wrong assertion?
Well, it certainly does seem to be, looking for the right strategy to take on the rest of this campaign and not quite landing in the right spot just yet. I agree with that. They're going to have to figure that out. They're going to have to figure out a clean line of attack to define her, because she's been out there defining herself, and Republicans are trying to do that simultaneously and haven't seemed to have decided exactly the strategy just yet. When we look at what's happening in Georgia, and you got Harris-Walz going down to Savannah, one thing that I take note of as a strategist is if you look at media markets, which is kind of how we plan out where we go in these states, 70% of Georgians live in the metro Atlanta media market, meaning you turn on the TV and you get Channel 5, Channel 2, Channel 11, Channel 46, right? So the rest of the media markets in the state, Tharon mentioned most of them, Columbus, Macon, Albany, Augusta, Savannah, and then you got a little bit in Tallahassee, a little bit in Jacksonville, a little bit in Chattanooga. Those are all tiny fractions of the state's population. You're not reaching a huge voter population when you're in any single one of them. So why would Harris and Walz go to a smaller market like this? Why would J.D. Vance be in Valdosta, which is in probably one of the smallest media markets that we have in the state? Well, it's because those media markets matter when the margin might be 12,000 votes. When it's that tight, every single part of the state can play a role and can be decisive. And so Trump's got to really jack up turnout in those rural red counties, get up to 85, 90% in some of them. And Kamala Harris has got to rev up turnout in Chatham County, which is Savannah, Richmond County, Bibb, Muskogee, Fulton, DeKalb, these places with heavy Democratic populations. And so you got to go hit all of them. And that's what we see them doing here. Tharon mentioned the black men, there are three groups that I had said before Biden got out that were big problems for Joe Biden, that were a hurdle to him winning re-election. That is metropolitan, white, college-educated voters, Gen Z voters who thought Joe Biden was too old and feel the most squeezed by inflation, the most squeezed by inability to buy a house, the most squeezed by college debt, and then black men. And we have seen the margins in Georgia close some. I mean, Trump's still maintaining a lead here in a way that Harris has taken a lead in some of the other swing states, but here Trump's maintaining a lead. And I think Harris has made progress with those three groups that I'm talking about. I have not seen the breakouts yet on the groups I'm talking about, the Gen Zs, the black men. I want to wait and see what's happening in the data that's coming in, and I kind of want to wait after Labor Day, after the honeymoon or the convention bump is over, and we kind of get back into the more leveled out campaign post next Monday. But those are still three groups I'm looking at, and Harris, it appears to me, has improved her standing over Joe Biden's standing with those groups.
Lisa, if I can say one quick thing, I haven't had a chance to respond to this honeymoon thing, right? Because when I decided to take a break from the podcast is when the shift happened. So we talk about this honeymoon with Harris. Well, guess what? Trump would have had a honeymoon too, because he came off the convention, right? He had the attempted assassination. B-Rob basically, and many Republicans felt like the race was over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason he didn't have a honeymoon, right? Because he would have had one, but he didn't because immediately after his convention was over, Joe Biden did something that shifted the race. And this is when the history books are right. When Charles Bullock, our good friend down at UGA, writes about this election, if Vice President Harris did not become sort of the presumptive nominee, and I remember my phone rung that morning, that Sunday morning, but about 1:45 that Sunday afternoon, Trump would have basically been in sort of the prime of his honeymoon, but the race shifted because it was after all the stuff had kind of happened. The second thing I want to mention is for our listeners, when you look at these numbers, and Brian touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of take you into the stats here, and you all I think y'all talked about it a little bit. I think Saba again did a good job of highlighting this, but right after the whole vice president, Veep stakes as we call it, happened, we had Andy Beshear, the governor from Kentucky, come to Georgia, and he went to Forsyth County. And I just want to crystallize it. Forsyth County in Georgia, for our listeners, is a county as a young boy like me growing up in Athens, Georgia. My grandfather would not let me go to Forsyth County because it was one of the places where the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, would gather. Lisa, Hosea Williams, as you know, went there and got into was attacked because this county did not want to integrate. This is a county that was a Republican stronghold. They had a Biden, Harris, there wasn't Harris-Walz, but a Harris rally day, and 300 people showed up, right? And then down in South Georgia, Washington County, you had over almost 100 women in a sort of southern county in the state, people coming out wanting to get involved. These are new people. So B-Rob is right. The reason why you see this rural effort happening, and this is why I think Democrats are strong, when we look at places like Columbus, Augusta, Savannah, Valdosta, and other places, got the young guy, Cosby Johnson, down in Brunswick, young African-American male that B-Rob and I've worked with. All these local officials are going to be able to activate their networks, Lisa. So they're going to go to their sororities, their Rotary clubs, their Kiwanis clubs, their parent groups, and they're going to organize. And he's right. The margin is going to be that close in Georgia. The last thing I want to say is this. Trump led the entire race in 2020. I know that because I was a senior advisor on the Biden campaign. It wasn't until that last poll, Lisa, where we said, oh my God, y'all, we can actually win this thing. And it was our internal poll. Even though the AJC and others kind of caught up to what we were seeing, we knew about 20 days out from Election Day, based on turnout and based on the polling, we were like, man, we're going to win this state. So the polling will get better for her, and Trump will continue to lead in the public polls. But the internal polls, as Brian knows, that's where you really want to pay attention to mid-October.
Yeah, and the nation will be watching Georgia very, very closely until then. Tharon, again, great to have you back. And we do want to give a special shout out to Saba Long, who was filling in the past month, doing a fantastic job. Saba, thank you so much, as always. Brian, always good to see you. Later this week, I was hoping we could talk about the switcheroo that seems to be happening. And is it a trend for folks like Jeff Duncan to support the Democratic ticket? And then now we have a Kennedy supporting the Trump ticket. So is this becoming a trend? We're going to talk about that later this week. See you then.